Well, we're almost to the midpoint of winter, so we thought we'd check out and see how our winter is doing so far compared to sort of what we were forecasting, what we can expect coming down the road. December was just a touch below average, pretty close to where we should be, though, with, again, an average temperature 38.2 degrees, so just slightly below average. Well, we know January has been cold, right? It hasn't been a very eventful winter, but January is cold, down by about 3.5 degrees below average. I was thinking it would average a little bit above that, but again, certainly it's been a cold January, and as we go looking at our snowfall, not a great deal of snow. He had about 2.8 inches in December and 3 inches in January, so that brings our total to just shy of 6 inches, but we should be just over 12 inches at this point with no snow coming in the short term of our forecast. Well, we know the polar vortex has been a factor, right? So the polar vortex, of course, became fractured and Arctic air came tumbling down and covering much of the country through a good portion of January. Of course, the big snowstorm down along the Gulf Coast, and really for a while a lot of the country was seeing very, very cold weather. Well, that's kind of let up a little bit, but what about moving forward? Well, of course, this is Groundhog Day coming up, so if the groundhog sees a shadow here, that means we have 6 more weeks of winter. If the groundhog does not see a shadow, that means we have an early spring. But let's look at the science behind all this, and not necessarily what this rodent wants to forecast. By the way, I think it will see a shadow, so again, we'll see if that plays out. But, you know, this whole Groundhog Day thing started back in the 1880s. 108 times the forecast was for continued winters and 20 times for early springs, but only right about 39% of the time. If you look back the last 10 years, the groundhog forecast has only been right 3 out of those 10 years, so that's about that percentage rate. All right, what's more about the science? It's about the La Nina pattern. We talked about this back in November, and that still is in effect. The La Nina being the active more of a northern jet stream, creating warmer than average temperatures in the south, cooler than average temperatures in the northern plain states, and again, above average precipitation here. The only fly in the ointment here has been, it's been a little wetter across the south. Of course, again, talking about that snowstorm that happened just a week or two ago. The pattern's going to continue, though. The La Nina is now actually getting active again. And as we go through the next month or two, we'll still see an active northern jet stream bringing storms from time to time that could regenerate along the coast, and that's where we get into that potential snowstorm or rain snow event for the city, and more snow that'll be happening as you move further inland. So as we move forward for the rest of winter, I still think we're going to see cold outbreaks, but they're not going to be as intense as what we just had in January. It was probably the worst of it, and they'll only last a couple of days here and there. February and March, by the end of it, will probably end up with above average temperatures, and that, again, forecast is kind of holding true as I look at some of the long-range data here in the next 1 to 2 weeks, more of a west to east flow instead of a more north to south flow. La Nina is still expected to sort of wind its way down as we get into the early part of the springtime. All right, what about, as we're talking about snowfall here, again, we're talking the potential for more snow, of course, but the majority of that, again, is going to be further off to the north. Still, that snow-rain battle will continue as we head in for areas, again, along the coast. That would include New York City. More snow than last year. I'm still thinking that's the case. Again, last year we had 7.5 inches of snow for the season. We'll already, again, about 6 inches of snow, so that won't be hard to beat, but it's still going to be below the average of about 25, 28 inches or so for New York City. Could get another 7 to 12 inches, though, before the winter's over for the city and coastal areas, a little bit more inland, about a foot, foot and a half, North Jersey, Hudson Valley to Connecticut. And again, further north, I think you're still going to see those higher amounts of snow as we go into the forecast. All right, well, let's think spring. About 50 days to go until spring begins. That will be on March 20th at 5:01 in the morning, our vernal equinox day and night being equal at that time frame. And the spring forecast, I think, will end up being warmer than average with our temperatures, but probably near average as we get into precipitation. So keep your eyes focused on springtime, but we still have, again, a chunk of winter left.